French from the Current Consulting Group. And are you on the line?
I don't think it's called in yet.
Okay. Byron Eve is on. I'm sure we can hear him yet. So I will start, and Byron, when you get on and you're able to speak, why don't you go ahead and jump in. But we have about 57 people online today, so we're going to start. We can get through this material and have some room for questions. Before we start, I just wanted to say that Byron sent out last night 2 documents that we hope you have printed with you so that you can follow along during the presentation and take notes. And taking notes is important because we're going to go over a lot of things quickly. I haven't had a chance to read either the report or the analysis. So today we're going to do a very, very broad overview of what is contained in the report and high-level 10,000-foot view of how you can start to use this information. And we're encouraging you that once you read it, you take the notes from this information and you start to assimilate it into your own franchise, your own lab, that you then the hotline that CCG has set up and look at ways that you can use it for the opportunities in your area. So, again, the training is going to be a broad overview so that you can look at it, and then you're going to read it. Once you read it, we assume that you're going to have a lot of questions, and you can get through that hotline. So with ours, and we're going to review the National Competitive Market Overview. And CCG was introduced back in January to the ARC Point Owner Group. We announced that we had several different services available to you, and we'll touch base on those at the end of the presentation. One of those was a local competitive market analysis, and we've done that for several owners. But as we started doing that, we very quickly recognized there was a very broad competitive market analysis that touched each of the franchise groups, no matter where you were. And so we worked with Byron and Felix to develop a national competitive market overview that you can have that really applies in general terms to every market and every owner. The local competitive analysis is available to you, and it's still available. So if you are interested in doing that, that is something that would go alongside this, similar in format from that Excel file that you've got, and similar in function where we deliver a local market analysis for you. We figure out which competitors we want to review, and we sit down with you and we review the findings via conference call so that you can take the information and learn how to use it in sort of the day-to-day operations of the business. So today we're going to just talk about a general overview and definition of the market, and we're going to go through the competitors that we've listed: LabCorp, Concentra, US Health, EMSI, and then we did some general categories of hospitals, sort of hospital/urgent care, and then national TPAs. And some of you, I don't have the list in front of who's on this phone, but some of you have had this conversation with me, with Joe, with Bill, Karen on the hotline, and we talk about specific opportunities in your market and sort of the key differentiators and how you can approach those opportunities. And this gives you a background from the national landscape to do the same thing. So just before we start, I wanted to talk a little bit about the screening market as a whole, because the question of what market are you in? Are you in the substance abuse testing market? Are you in the substance testing market? Are you in drug testing? A bunch of different ways that drug, alcohol testing and the clinical work that you do in each of the ARC Point locations impact different segments of this very broad market. So some of it you think of as drug testing. Sometimes it's employee onboarding, right? That some of the TPAs in the industry specialize in, bring on clients or bringing on candidates. And part of that is a drug test or a background check or screening. Laboratory testing is a piece, and that's why we see some of these major competitors coming in that are labs. Criminal justice is also part of the substance abuse testing market. We talk about it in the workplace setting, but it's a huge segment, and some of you know from hotline conversations are seeing opportunities in criminal justice. It is, sort of kid and cousin, but it is not the same. And you need to be aware of how your location can play a role and how you can earn market share in criminal justice as you think about the substance abuse testing market. There's also pain management and medication monitoring. We're not going to talk about that a lot today, but they are two really significant growing pieces of the testing market. And I assume that each of you will see those opportunities arise as you expand your revenue and your client base. And so you want to make sure that you understand what pain and medication monitoring are, and then the role that you can play in it. And then the last end, I put in the roadside testing. As we see medical marijuana and recreational marijuana being approved in different states, and Bill can always jump in and give you a lot more detail on where and when and how, as we've done in the past. But roadside testing type of event, if you are providing on-site services, and if you're providing post-accident reasonable suspicion services, things like roadside testing come into play in your market segment as well. When we talk about what a competitor is, I've got a bunch of little kids in my house, girls, and if you're not familiar with the term, there's a term called frenemy, right? It's your friend and your enemy. And in this market, there's a frenemies. There are people who are directly competing against for business that you are so partnered with. They're a vendor or you're providing services for them. That happens all of the time. And so you have to really think about in each particular opportunity, is the competitor and is the competitive landscape going to be with a frenemy, right? And in your best interest to partner with that entity to get part of a deal because there's strength in that, or is it in your best opportunity to go up against them? And as you use that hotline and you learn about the competitive market space, you become very savvy in the ways that you can approach a deal. And sometimes you can go into deals in more than one way, and that's an effective way to get the business. You can either own it, a relationship, and get something, or you can be a part of it and be a collection site or provide some of the services component of the program if you believe that one of your partners is stronger in the position to win the overall opportunity. So, when you're looking at that competitive base, and I just listed a few here, you're thinking about the background screening companies that offer drug screening as a single part. So they're the ones who are going in and saying, hey, we're going to onboard your employee. And as part of that, we're going to do a fingerprint, we're going to do a CAM, we're going to do an I-9, and we're also going to do a drug test. And you have a lot of those out there. Drug TPAs who very specifically niche teams who really focus on drug testing. And sometimes you'll see those in specific industries like the petrochemical industry, where there's a specialty that they are trying to cover. Some of the ones doing strong BQ programs that are focused on the FMCSA or the FAA market, or like we said, petrochem. You see those out there. And they're mostly substance abuse testing. It's the same product, but they usually have some sort of niche or way that they're going to approach the market that puts them in a very good position. Then there's the laboratories. We're going to talk a lot about those, but they offer the lab testing, the primary product, but then they also become, through partnerships, through their services in-house, they become a TPA. And then there are collection sites. There are approximately, you'll in the report, 5,000 collection or TAs. Oftentimes those are small, single-location collection facilities, similar to you, but most are independent, so they don't have the strength of the ArcPoint Labs brand behind them, the collateral material, the branding material, the marketing. So you're similar, but different enough that you can make a big impact to that. And so we see a lot that are collection sites who are competing on a local level for the same business that you are. So we're going to jump right now into the first on your list. And again, when off this call, when you have time, you're going to go through that Excel file where we have details for you about 40 different categories in the competitive landscape. It's fairly easy to read reports. If any of you guys are familiar with sort of Consumer Reports and what they do, we follow that kind of a mentality where we've given you the availability, information in notes, and then possible pricing and competitive information for each of these different groups that you can use, and that coincides with the summary report that you've got that gives you that broad narrative to help you learn more about the market. But we're going to start with Quest, and Quest Diagnostics is publicly traded. Again, broad review, guys. So publicly traded is very sound financially. They will be around, as far as I can tell, forever. They publish the Drug Testing Index, DTI, maybe 3 times a year. It's an excellent source for data on sensitivity rates, test results. It's often referenced in the industry for statistical information and trends in drug testing. And so according to the DTI last year, they did about 8.6 million, or we rounded up to about 9 million drug tests. And about 1.9 million of those were DOT, and the rest were non-DOT tests. But it's just workplace in the it isn't really talking about their criminal justice and their medication monitoring. And Quest are probably most known for in our industry. They're 2,200 and always growing and always shrinking as well. Paid service centers that they have nationally. Service centers are what you'll most often sort of come up against, in a sense. And so think about Quest. They have strengths and weaknesses, and they fall right into this sort of category, right? They're a partner with you, but they directly compete. So the strength in Quest is their brand name recognition. Their PSCs are inexpensive. They sell or wholesale PSC services as $5 or $6. They've recently had an increase. And you know, under the $10 range for a PSC collection is very common. They're as LabCorp. We're going to talk about why a little bit, but they're not as low as LabCorp because they function separately. So the Quest patient service centers are managed through Quest Clinical Laboratory. Why that makes a difference is because they are not as each to change, and they have a ceiling because they pay internally to the clinical group for its PSC collection. So it's subsidized because the clinical division of Quest wants the phlebotomy revenue that comes out of those patient service centers. You can get a low rate, but they can't go as low as LabCorp, where they don't have that internal cost associated with each collection. They also, Quest, as a strength, has an integrated PPN network, and you are part of the PPN network. So PPN network, when someone goes in to find a Quest location through their interface, shows the availability of all of their patient service centers, and then it also shows their PPN location. I've talked to many of you about making sure that if you have a local opportunity and they say, hey, no, we work with Quest, we go through Quest, then there is the ability through Quest user interface for a specific client to say, we want to all go to the ARC point location at 123 South Main Street. You do that with the client if they like you, if they want to use you, if you're providing them service, even though Quest is their provider. So, you know, I encourage you to know about that and do that, and don't feel like if you go into an opportunity and they say they're using Quest, then you kind of cower and walk out the door and say, I can't compete. You can, and if only you're going to get that piece, then that's a good piece to get, because sometimes these very high volume national and international companies that you can get that collection. Granted, you're doing it at a reduced rate, but you can get the collection transaction. And very often, if they need a breath alcohol, you can get those other services as well at the same time. Quest has their own ECCF. They do it through FormFox, but they're ECCF capable. They do tons of DOT and non-DOT testing, so that makes a strength in the industry. But note that the PSCs don't do breath alcohols. I think the last they had like 8 of the 200 patient service centers where they do breath alcohol. And then because it's done by the clinical group, they cannot influence change there. So if there's a client who says, hey, I want you to add it, we're going to send the transactions there, the likelihood that they're going to do that is very slim. They have a very robust user interface to report and order tests. It's well developed, it's well managed, and their releases are very professionally done, and that's one of their strengths. And you know, as we talked about, part of that PPN network, they're really a good partner for collections. So make sure that you take advantage of being part of the PPN network with your local market. So they're getting the sort of, within the network, you're being the preferred vendor, and you can lock that down. Some weaknesses that they're very limited. We talked about having BAT. So if they don't have BAT, they're not going to do random work for a DOT collection. They're not going to do a lot of post-accident testing. They don't do after hours. They don't do random program management. They obviously don't have an MRO because that's not allowed because of the DOT. But they have good, solid MRO partners. But into that, you know, their services are limited, and sometimes even their services that are 9 to 4, 9 to 12, and then 1 to 4, and you switches, urine drug screens, you know, stop at 3 o'clock. And so very limited. They can't do weekend collections. They can't do night collections. And those are very often the times where somebody who's a candidate has the opportunity to go have their drug test done. And so that is a strength in an ARCpoint Lab owner's position. Customization is very limited. And your customization is some limited as well. But like you said, if they wanted to, or like I said, if they wanted to have a specific response test available, if they wanted to DNA, they may not be able to do that. If they wanted to use a particular device, they're not going to be able to do that. Now, they're going to have the Quest enormous PIMs, but so do you because you have Quest as a vendor partner. So it's not a leg up. It's really a neutral in terms of your competitive advantage with Quest. The operations of the services, they're not going to keep soft. They're not going to keep any LabCorp products. They're not going to do any LabCorp collection. So when uses LabCorp, Lab comes in with LabCorp chain of custody, Quest will not do the collections for them. We said that they're owned by clinical, so their clinical clients really rule where those PSCs open and close. And that's why I said the network grows and shrinks all the time. It is because if there is a huge clinical opportunity that opens, they will open a patient service center, but they will not do that for an employer opportunity and a workplace opportunity for drug testing. So they're not often as convenient for workplace as they are for the clinical business and how they maintain that network. You're going to fairly consistently across all of these slides, no focus on SMB. SMB is the small to mid-sized business. Quest will not assign an account manager. They will not give a single point of contact. They will not have a local relationship for any client who is generally going to do 5,000 drug tests a year or so. Or, by the way, sometimes it's fine. They go back and forth as 5,000 employees or below. And so when you're looking at a local employer who has 1,000 employees, Quest is not going to give them any attention. They're going to be lumped into the same queue as everybody else, where you are going to give them attention. They're going to have access most likely to you as the owner and your direct staff. And you're going to be willing, 1,000 employees a year to 50% turnover, you're going to be very willing to do for them that are over and above. And Quest isn't going to do that. And when you can explain that to an opportunity, that the industry is hurting for it. When you're an employer who has 1,000 employees, you actually think you're doing pretty well for yourself, and you're big, and you want people to pay attention to you. Some of your companies are not going to do that. And then that's the same thing for the TPA for large clients. They're going to do custom randoms or random polls or anything out of the ordinary unless you're a very large client. And so that's, again, a weakness of Quest and a strength for your location. LabCorp we're going to jump into, and it's very much the same story. They're publicly traded, and they have a high brand name. They are, the Walmart of our industry, right? They are the low-cost provider. They are not the service provider. They're not looking to be. They often provide PSC collections in their 1,000 patient service centers for under $5 at a wholesale rate. And so that is what they get. That is what they want, and they're comfortable with it. So losing market share because of it, they are getting into a service environment right now. And so they're losing it, but they're never going to get out of the picture, and they have 14 million drug tests annually supporting that those 1,100 patient service centers. They do not maintain a strong PPN network, but they obviously do refer through their user interface and their scheduling tool to third-party providers. And again, that's where you guys come in, because we'll get those referrals where Quest is a laboratory, but they need a collection facility because there's not a patient service center available in that area. So look at the strengths. It's similar in many ways to Quest. They have the brand name recognition. They have large, not half the size, but a large PSC network. They have and the PPN network, not again as strong, and you as Quest, and you can when you're dealing with LabCorp that you're getting a third-party collection site, whereas with Quest, when you're scheduling, and I encourage all of you to go schedule. Go these guys. Go in, go online, try and schedule a drug test to happen so that you know how it works. But their PPN network's not as integrated. They do have the electronic chain of custody, and they're a good part, again, for the collections. But weaknesses are very similar. The hours of operations are sometimes limited. Their facilities are upgrading, but they've sort of been known as not as nice. They have no specific PN network. They will not bundle a price generally, unless it's a huge opportunity and say, you can go to any of our collection sites and it'll be X dollars. And so that's a weakness. They have no focus on a small and mid-sized market. Same thing, that threshold is 5,000, 10,000 collections annually before you would have a named account manager or even a specific person you can call into their call center and get support from. And then their locations are based more on the clinical work that they get. Is the first of a similar group where it is a facility. It's funny, Byron and I had done this work and then had to up this information from draft to final very recently because Concentra was just sold. They were part of Humana. They were the occupational health wellness arm of Humana. Humana sold them, closed in second quarter of this year, to Select Medical Holding Company and another VC group, and that's all spelled out in your report. When they were Humana, they were really not actively soliciting drug screening. So they had 300 medical centers, and they have 38 states. They have a huge menu of services. They have a lot of wellness services. And then they often are co-located at an employer site for someone who's going to do large volume of collections and drug tests. They put in place huge price increases when they were under Humana because it was that they didn't really need that business, and so let's see if they could get it for a premium. And they could. They got it. And that's largely because of that huge print and standard operating procedures throughout those 300 clinics. big data last week, chances are not going to see a big reduction in that because they're getting it, and they have seen a reduction in their volume based on that increase. So that's one of the weaknesses we've got listed. They're high priced, and so they're out of a PPN network as a provider for many of those partners. Still have brand recognition. They've done a lot of work on their website, on their name, on their brand, and you see that strengthening as you live in the industry. They have that big network. They're rated with most of the major laboratories, although if you're looking, at strengths and weaknesses together, they have no electronic chain of custody right now. They're piloting in 8 locations through a FormFox integration, but they did not do an electronic chain, which is really an issue for a lot of employers now because they're doing national hiring and they need to be able to use an electronic chain of custody because they don't have a paper chain in someone's hand. The UI is still dated, but it's and that's the user interface. So that's where a client goes in, logs in, and gets their drug test results and orders. It's slightly dated, but it's being upgraded now. And I'm sure with the new rebranding and the new ownership, we'll see that happen quickly. They do have extended hours at every location, but they do. And they have baths and wellness services in most locations, not all. Some of their weaknesses, though, they have long wait times. I've talked to a bunch of you who've said you get opportunities sent to you because they don't Concentra. And so use that to your advantage. They have long wait times. They do a lot of OCMED stuff, and sometimes that is detrimental to getting business and keeping business. They don't do collections. Most of the clinics, they, again, don't focus on that small, medium business. They don't do audit assistance, policy, and all of those things that you do as a TPA. And I'm going to pause there and say this because within your group, Chris Williams and the ArcPoint group is a TPA. So they do maintain those national relationships. And I'm not going to get into, when you know that there's an opportunity that's gone beyond your local you go to us and you handle that. But you are functioning as a local level TPA for your clients. And so you need to serve yourself as a local TPA. And your service portfolio is intensive. You can do policy, which a lot of people shy away from. You do training. You'll do on-sites often. So that is one of the weaknesses for Concentra because they will not do that at a local level, and they certainly won't do it for a small client. How it works. Big clinic group. They have over 200 clinics operating in 20 states. They have good brand recognition, not like a household name, brand recognition. They are nationally managed, so they have those consistent services that people like to know. If I'm going to go into a U.S. HealthWorks facility, can I do an oral fluid drug test? And the answer is yes. And which products do you stock? And they know that. And that is a benefit of working with HealthWorks. They're a well-matched competitor for you. So, again, encourage you to go in, look at them, look at their website, look at their services, look at this report, and validate that the report and that general information is the same for you in your local market. And then you want to make sure that your pricing is competitive because they're competitively priced in areas. They, within our industry, have significant brand name recognition. Again, it's not a low name, but they've been around for a very long time. And ArcPoint Labs is newer. It doesn't mean necessarily anything except sometimes when people choose, they choose just because they know them. They've heard their name. That's sort of the strength in advertising. And as you grow, that'll happen as well. But U.S. HealthWorks has that brand name recognition. They are competitively priced. They have not gone that Concentra route with huge price increases because they are still interested in getting the drug screening collection income. And they have a wide menu of services. They're integrated with a lot of laboratories. They'll do all the major laboratories. We'll do ECCF collections. They have that services. And they also do some the urgent care and instant testing that is suitable for a lot of the construction and DOT industry. We don't policy work for those parts. Same with like audit assistant and all of those specialty items that people need and they don't know how to go to that ArcPoint Labs does. U.S. HealthWorks in general doesn't do. They do limited training and they don't focus necessarily on the small business because they do their relationships at the corporate level. And so they provide that TPA and that TPA management at the corporate level as well. And so big strength. Local level, knowing who you talk to, knowing, block who's next to you, however you say that, is important to clients. It's really important to small and mid-sized employers because they do not want to be lost in the pool of all the large employers. They want to feel like they're being heard and that they're being attended to. And it's a key strength in every market there is. And it's where the larger players are losing revenue all the time because they won't give that individualized service. And you're seeing that thematically through all of these different providers. MSI, same thing. It's been for a very long time, since the 70s, and they've been strong historically. Cecile Martin, who runs EMSI, is the P over the workplace services, well known, has been around long enough I have, so I can recall. And she's very likable and well-liked, and she has a lot of connections. And so as we see the lab products and services, they very often go to EMSI and Concentra as well, by the way. List their opinion and to make sure that the changes that they're making and the way that they're changing their business models are in sync with players like EMSI. So they have a large footprint, 230 locations in the United States, and it's growing all the time. They have a very strong workplace and insurance vertical. What's known for is that they have a strong on-site collection network. They will go on-site. One of their biggest clients for years now is Southwest Airlines, where they coordinate through the flight schedules, on the gate and doing random selections, escort pilots, flight attendants, and maintenance personnel from the gate to a collection area in the airport and doing collections. And they can do that effectively through their service platform. And I think that is one of the things they are most recognized for, the strength of that on-site scheduling service. They have 24/7 operations, which is important to the ECCS. They have a very wide menu of services. They have all the same things, the brand recognition. But the weaknesses, and it's very much a trend you're seeing as we go through these. Don't do those TPA services. They outsource them, but they have good partners. So you need to understand what's important in each opportunity that you go into. You need to ask the questions. You need to do the discovery. You have to hear the underlying message. Some people are saying what's important to them is price, but what you're hearing from them about why they're changing is a service-related issue. So you want to find out what that is, and as you develop what your pitch will be from your individual location to those clients, you want to say, you want to make sure you're addressing what the real concerns are. And again, in any of these, you can be going in as a selected partner with some of these, not necessarily EMSI, but you want to keep remembering that when you think about Quest and LabCorp, that you can be going in as a partner with them to provide a lot of these services at a local level. I want to point third bullet under weaknesses. It does not generally promote at a local level. So again, it's like U.S. HealthWorks, where they're dealing with things on a national level for all of their sites, and so they don't necessarily go after business locally. So that's another key advantage to each of your owner locations. Hospitals and urgent care, we don't have a general overview because they're so varied throughout the U.S. So we just did some weaknesses for you. They often have very great local brand recognition. There's a bunch of you on the phone from sort of the Pennsylvania area where I'm from, Doylestown Hospital, Abington Hospital, know those names, Children's Hospital, University of Pennsylvania Hospital, we know them well, and so they have great local brand recognition. So because of that, they have satellite offices that often do like the workers' compensation services. They are really sort of focused. There are some, and I know some of you have talked to me about those, where they've done this sort of like outreach, and they have outreach satellite offices where they're trying to focus on the workplace market. And I think Matt, offices, if you're on the phone, I think we went into that in your market, where I think it was you, or maybe it was you, Anthony, if you're on the phone, where we saw a local, I think it was you, a local hospital who had done a broad marketing campaign for workplace services and satellite offices. So you'll see it, but it's rare. This is not a strength. We've got it in the strength column, but they have high error rates. That'd be a weakness. One of the things they do is they have high error rates. They're used to doing hospital services. They often take a collection opportunity, and they'll do in-house, and it's not a SAMHSA certified laboratory. The specimen just goes missing in sort of the massive operations of an ER. And it's difficult because they use on chain, or they use their internal chain, or they use their internal lab. As somebody using a hospital, it's sort of like your worst case scenario, because you're often trying to hunt down that specimen, and then by the time you realize it wasn't viable, it was incorrectly tested. But again, that said, there's sort of, when there's an accident, a workplace injury, a reasonable suspicion, sometimes people are like, I don't know what to do, let's just go to the local urgent care or hospital. And so they do get a lot of business through that. The things in the weakness column is they are extraordinarily expensive. You can see hospital and urgent care because they're used to billing through an insured system, right? They're used to billing Aetna. They're used to seeing, Blue Cross, Blue Shield. You can sometimes see collections in the hundreds of dollars for a single collection. And the same collections, by the way, that went misdirected and you didn't get them reported for 9 days. But they often charge fantastic rates to have a single collection done. Because, again, they're not really doing this in most cases as their normal business process. They rarely, if ever, offer those TPA services, policy training, MRO, reasonable suspicion consultation. None of that is offered in most cases through these hospitals and urgent care centers. And then they have limited and varied services. Some offer alcohol, some don't. Some will say they do blood alcohol, they don't do breath, they don't do saliva, they don't do instant, they don't stock instant, they don't DOT collectors, although they would likely do observed. So you get a really wide area. You want to be able to have your key differentiators when you go into any opportunity where there's a hospital providing the service, where you can really manage them because you focus on this industry. That's going to be an important way for you to win business away from some of those local urgent care hospitals. And some of the other things are just, the stuff right, the wait times in an ER are long. By the time a wait time at an urgent care or a hospital goes, the opportunity for a breath alcohol test come and gone as well. And so you want to think about your experiences in those locations and how that would play itself out for a drug screen or a breath alcohol test while we're in a workplace perspective. And our big category is the large TPAs and the screening companies. I listed some of them for you, but this is, the First Advantage, Sterling, HireRight, DISA, EBI, Vertical Screen, eScreen, Alere. They're always a funny one because eScreen, Alere is also a laboratory. i3Screen, there's a lot of these that fall in this big category of TPA. They are diversified with industries. Some are background screening companies, like we talked about, who have drug testing as a portfolio product. Some are drug screening, mainly companies like an eScreen, Alere, but then they can often offer through their partnerships those other services like onboarding and backgrounds and fingerprints and things like that. They have changed fantastically over the past 10 years with ownership, acquisitions, mergers, giant reductions in forces, lots of outsourcing, right? Lots of phones and customer service calls being answered in the Philippines and in India. And customers generally do that. They have high turnover of staff, especially when they're doing those outsourced staff. The turnover is sometimes 400% and 500%. And so those of you who have taken your ArcPoint location from seed to wherever you are now, you know how complicated this India is. And the last thing that a customer wants is to have an issue with the drug screen, a positive, a concern about medical marijuana or synthetic opioids or fingernail testing, and they get somebody who they spell drug. They're in a different country. They don't do this testing. They've been trained for a week or two, and now they're picking up the phone and they're answering. A huge weakness of the TPAs who do that sort of outsourcing and who have been impacted by this acquisition and merger and spin-off. Strengths are that drug testing, and I say drug, in the very general sense, drugs. It's drug testing is some of the wellness services, it's some of the physical exam services, but it is mainly alcohol testing. It's been a loss leader. It's often something that we do it. We do it. We're not great at it. We outsource it. We actually outsource it. We outsource it. We have a ownership group that the collections rarely have a collection site or we get collections. It's all done through the network, and the network may be through the labs or their independent internal network. But they all do it, but it's often a loss leader, and so they will price it very well, and they're very competitive in terms of pricing. That is, they're also not going to provide the service that you're going to provide to an employer. And so similar weeds you're going to see on that right-handed column. They've got a loss of focus. They don't do SMB well. Very limited compliance and policy resources, and sometimes because they are a consumer reporting agency, they have very stringent concerns and restrictions on policy best practice advice, and those things that they'll do that you can come in and say that you're willing to do and that you do very well for a small and mid-sized employer that provides a service that is important to an employer and would be a differentiator that would make them switch from one of these large TPAs. And we're seeing that 2 years in significant numbers where small and mid-sized employers are shying away and going to more local, regional providers so that they can get the attention they want. That said, these guys are one-stop shop, right? And so they do that very well in many cases where you can get a package that's a drug test and a background check and a fingerprint and an I-9 and all of the things you need on board an employer. And so it's a one-stop shop, and it's sometimes very valuable. You can do it as well. You can do it at a local level, and that's going to be a key differentiator for you. They fall in this frenemy category. So you often getting chain of custodies and people walking in the door where you're doing collections for them. And don't underestimate the importance of that, especially when you're new or when you're in a growth phase within your market. You're going to hire staff because you're getting too busy, your wait times are getting too long, so you're about to put on another person. That feeder collection-only business that you get from these TPA partners is important because it's paying for, it's transactional volume that's coming in. And again, you get a discount to some of your direct contracts, putting in the door, and it helps you do those growth spurts, do those, bridges into some of the services because it's the transaction. You're paying somebody to be in your location during all of those hours of operations. Some of that transaction volume through these TPA partners, just keeps you and your staff busy and keeps that volume coming in. And again, those are managed through corporate, but you'll see a lot of those, and I'd be surprised if anybody's on this phone who's got their doors open who doesn't see them from some of those TPA partners. They have most often ECC integrations and integrations, and they vary, obviously, because there are a lot, even if it's focused on very large. And when I say very large, we focus on the large and small. And I'll go to small as being, $2 to $4 million in annual revenue as a TPA. They still generally have lab integrations with all the major laboratories and can utilize electronic data custodies nationally. They often have the onboarding focus, so paralleling that with the weakness, onboarding is just one piece of the market, albeit the biggest, but it's, pre-employment testing. And so your strength to them is that you can do all of that post-employment testing, random program management, reasonable suspicion, best practice, policy and training. That stuff is very important. They often have vertical strategies, and something when we've done the local competitive analysis for some of the owners, focused on, are you, based on what your market is, as an ArcPoint lab, are going to have a specific vertical that you're focused on? Are you going to be doing, construction? Are you going to be doing healthcare? You are, look at what some of the collateral materials are from these TPAs that are putting out there and see how you do and how you at a local level can compete for those services and what they do. What they lump in. If you're going to go to Byron, we worked yesterday a little bit on, for one of the missions on FAA, right? So what would you do? What would you highlight? If you're going to have a vertical strategy, what would you do if it was an FAA market, you're close to an airport and you think you can do that? What are the services that are specific to that vertical that you can package together in a product offering to specifically hit that market? You want to do that, and some of these TPAs do that very well. And again, learn from them and work with we work with Byron and the team at ArcPoint to understand how you can do that for your specific market. And then often do, the wellness services that we're seeing become very important in our market for TB shots, PPD titers, physicals, tests, fitness for duties. A lot of those are done through the TPAs as well. But again, the trend here is those weaknesses, the lack of focus through their massive acquisition and change. Their national collection site, say they've managed them. They manage them. So you guys would know from your perspective, how are you managed by them? You're not. They know what you do when you do it, and you give them updates. So they manage it. There's no quality control. There's no performance management. And that's a weakness for them, because that is, we've talked about this as we've met as a team here for these past practicum series. Consistently now for 3 years, candidate experience is the single most important thing for U.S. and international employers. And so what's happening at that local level to those candidates as we get into this very competitive employment marketplace, it's important that the candidate experience is good. And at a local level, you can really strongly compete against some of these larger TPAs for that level of service that employers are looking for. Again, remember what I said at the very beginning of this call. You can influence at a level selected, how you're selected, that network you participate in. And the easy way to do that is not you, but partnering with the opportunity you're providing the service with and saying, hey, do you know that you can go to First Advantage or Sterling Higher Right and say, always want to be matched with, ArcPoint Labs in Birmingham. You can always do that. So that's an important way to sort of play both sides of the relationship with the TPAs and get some more volume at level. And by the way, you can also then provide some of the ancillary services. So if they've got a contract nationally with one of those TPAs, but they're looking for policy, they're looking for training, you can also become that service provider. And very often, those are things that are much less price sensitive than a single transaction, drug test, or collection. So you want to make sure that you always, again, even if you go in and they say, hey, I'm here and I'm happy, and you're not going to be able to necessarily compete at a local level because it's a national TPA, you can make sure that they're aware of all of those other services that you offer that can get you a local relationship, and then you can lock in to get some of the other services that you get through the TA relationship. To go through that very quickly, it of course took much more than I ever thought it would, because it always does. I want to leave a little bit of time for any questions, and you can submit those on the website, and Jessica will jump in here and tell you a little bit more. But there's a lot on the call, so if we've got them and we don't get to the question you've got, certainly send them to us and we will respond to them. But remember that CC, in partnership with ArcPoint Labs, offers the customized sales enrichment programs. Many owners are taking advantage of those programs. Each one of them has a Jumpstart program available, so that if you want to and commit less, you can do what's a 6-week or an 8-week program instead of the 12-week. Make sure that it fits your purposes and make sure that it fits your budget, and start those sales enrichment programs. And that helps you to integrate the information in this report and the information from today's call into a habit of developing a pipeline and analyzing and attacking your local market. We have local competitive analysis available, and if you're interested, you can go on the Owner SharePoint site and see what that is. And they get a similar format to what you have on that Excel file today. And it'll you select the local competitors you want as part of the report, and we'll provide that report to you and your team. And I keep encouraging everyone, some people are really good at it, some people we haven't heard from yet, to use the CCG hotline. What we've learned over the past 6 months using that hotline is that you can, if you've got an opportunity that you want to talk to us about, send an email with a little bit of information on the opportunity and some of the details, and we'll schedule some time with you. And so that it doesn't have to be, just pick up the phone and call. You can do that via email. We can schedule time, and we can spend 15, 20 minutes with you on the phone going through the opportunity. And we're seeing that owners are having a much higher success rate in closing and or just understanding the opportunity and why they lost it or didn't get it or what the next steps are when they're using the CC hotline to help them with the opportunities on a local level. And the information on the phone number and the email address are there for you to use. So with 5 minutes, do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Nina, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me step in, and I apologize to everybody. We were on the call here at the franchise group from start to finish, but the mics were muted and we couldn't be heard. But you covered everything that I wanted you to cover, Nina. Thank you again for what you did today and for the time and effort that you put on this competitive analysis. I do want to add, it appears, and I've got some emails from a couple owners that they had trouble downloading the Excel document, which is really the heart of this thing. So I will make sure that it appears that the name of the document too long. I'll make sure that that's corrected, and I'll certainly send out notification of that following the call. One last thing before we take questions. You kind of summarized it very well. This whole program was designed to really be a sales support arm for you guys, and not only knowledge and information, but but help when it comes to how do I structure this deal? How do I, what's my best opportunity to go in and attack this situation that I have in front of me? And obviously, that's those of you who've used it. I'm getting just great reports back from them. I mean, they've got a wealth of information available to you based on the experience that they've had in this industry for a long, long time. You need to take advantage of it. It's there. Use email address and use a phone number. Obviously, I struggle with the number of calls I get on a daily basis and do what I can to respond, but these guys can help you, and they're very responsive. So I urge everyone to use the line as much as they can.
Thank you very much, Byron. And just a few quick questions that we have remaining. Question came in, is EMSI known as Exam 1 locally?
Exam 1 is actually part, the wholly owned of Quest Diagnostics. Exam 1 functions as part of sort of their PPN network, and they were sort of in direct response to EMSI because they provide mostly sort of that on-site testing services. So it's different, and if you go on Quest website, you'll see information specifically on Exam 1.
Now, would you consider any lab tests now to fall into these lists of competitors?
Yes, and Byron, at one point we did talk about maybe putting those out there. We didn't feel like it was significant in everybody's market to do it. We can certainly talk about that at a local level or as a follow-up to this. But yeah, they are a competitor.
Okay, so then obviously if you submitted that question, then you would want to get in touch with Nina or Byron independently to find more information about that. What do you have, if you're doing a competitive analysis on our point, what would you say are our strengths?
Well, in a lot of ways, we sort of did do that a little bit here about talking, what are your strengths and weaknesses. But I think, Bill, you would agree. I know you're on the phone and probably maybe muted, but the single most important thing is that local level of service backed up by a strong corporate support. Your materials, your ability to be competitive in pricing, all those things come from the franchise group, but your ability to manage and maintain relationships at a local level is very, very important. I think that's the single strongest differentiator. But if you want to sit down and talk to one of us about, specifically how we sort of outline those are things that we do as part of the enrichment program, but it's also something we can do the hotline with you. But I think overreaching the competitive pricing, the ability to maintain relationships at a local level, and then just, very wide array of services that you can provide is the strength of the ArcPoint Lab owner and brand.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Nina. And this does bring us to the end of our meeting today. On behalf of ArcPoint Labs Current Consulting Group, we'd like to thank you for your attendance today. We hope that you found this presentation informative and helpful. As Byron mentioned previously, if you did have difficulty downloading the Excel spreadsheet, you will be notified when that has been revised and is accessible. We will be sending out a survey to you via email to follow up on today's meeting, and we would greatly appreciate your participation in the survey. This does conclude today's presentation, and we again thank you for your attendance, and this concludes today's call.